for such an approach. Basically, Liège is a millennium-old city. We celebrated the millennium in 1980. And in the 19th century, it was one of the richest cities in Europe due to the steel. And the local steel here was at the origin in the 18th century. To start with, during the next centuries, was the basis of the development of the Swedish steel, which was made by Åhléns and in fact by people of this area. So the steel industry was, even before industrialization, a very strong one here, and it was it developed, of course, immensely during the 19th century. And then, unfortunately, during the 20th century, it slowly went down with the two wars first, and then the late period of the century. Summer is today. I hope it's also here for the whole week. I heard that on Wednesday it's not really good. So anyway, and you are here in the city with this strong history, with a lot of cultural possibilities because of the past that has developed. This is the only city, except Brussels, of course, in the French-speaking part of Belgium, where you can find an opera house, a concert hall, a major theater, and all kinds of cultural activities here. A university, which is a comprehensive university, and a place where what you are concerned about is really meaningful. And so I wish you a very, very good week here, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you achieve interesting work together.
Mr. Rector, dear Bernard, ladies and gentlemen, dear Jacques, I'm particularly happy and proud to welcome you all such a prestigious audience at HEC-Management School. I am proud because the success of this conference can be seen as a major achievement, of course for the EMES network that I want to congratulate, but also for the Centre for Social Economy and the whole HEC-Management School I am managing. 5 years ago, when I was appointed as a Dean and Director General of the school, I tried to launch with my colleagues of the board and the strong support of our university our strategy to better position our schools through emphasizing what we called our peaks of excellence. After a year of analysis, we decided to put forward 6 real peaks of excellence, the names of which are displayed on the flags hanging in the entrance hall of this building. One of those peaks of excellence, probably the one which is most specific to HEC today as compared to other Belgian business schools, is named Social Enterprises and the Social Economy. Indeed, the Center for Social Economy, who is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, was already renowned through its research under the leadership of Professor Jacques Defourny, and it had been hosting the coordination unit of the EMES network for several years. However, we had only 2 courses at the time on these topics taught at the Department of Economics and in the program in management. Therefore, we decided to launch a new specialized program in management of social enterprises within the core master's program in management. To achieve such an ambitious educational program, the school and the Center for Social Economy succeeded in setting up 3 new sponsored shares, corporate shares, to organize the required courses. The first, held by Professor Sibyl Mertens, focuses on social entrepreneurship, and it is sponsored by an old cooperative in the banking sector, SERA. The second, held by Professor Benjamin Huygard, covers more broadly social enterprise management, and it is sponsored by a public investment fund called Sowexon. And the third one is sponsored by a major philanthropic foundation, the InBev Bilateral Fund. This last chair is on social investment and new philanthropy, and the appointment of a new professor is still to come. That's news to share with your colleagues all around the world. The quite diverse origin of these 3 chairs suggests quite symbolically how the topics you will be discussing are at the crossroad of the market, the state, and the civil society. The civil society being here represented by a foundation as well as by a cooperative, which I think makes much sense to MS and probably many of you. Finally, you probably know from the conference program that HEC-Management School has been recently honored by a prestigious award. More precisely, one of the very few research programs selected in economics and management by the Belgian science policy for the 5 coming years focuses precisely on social
Thank you very much for hosting this, the fourth EMES International Research Conference on Social Enterprise. Colleagues, friends, and members of the EMES network, please receive a warm welcome for being here on behalf of the EMES Board of Directors. With the crisis, also universities have felt cut-downs, reductions in grants, even in salaries somewhere, and for many this may be the only conference to attend within a year. So I'm proud, I'm honored that you've chosen the EMES conference to attend, or the community to join. Let me show you a map. Jacques, can we, wait, good. Yeah. In EMES, we have not been obsessed with growth. In fact, we have not. In fact, for many years we remained a relatively small club. And if you ask me how to become a member of that small club, I would have to talk for 2, 3, 4 hours, probably a full day. And still nobody would understand fully the procedure for becoming a member of EMES, neither would I. Not that we didn't want to grow. We didn't mind, or we weren't against having new members, but we wanted to grow organically, more than just scaling up. In fact, I'm not sure that we have found the exact right way yet. But I am very sure that we are happy finally to be able to welcome new members, actually from all over the world. And I hope that you feel this throughout the conference during the week. Showing this map and saying this doesn't mean though that I'm suddenly a true follower of scaling up or growth in the area of social enterprise and social innovation. Please remember that we are researchers, we are scholars. There are other ways of having impact. Also, I see this interest in EMES, in this relatively close club, as an interest in our, not definition, but our approach to this entire field. Also with governance issues, crossovers to civil society, political issues, and concern. I think actually, at the moment, that we may face a situation of a kind of almost epidemic interest in scaling up activities and growth activities in the area of social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. When thinking of this, I came to think of a conversation I had many years ago with a political scientist, a colleague, Jacques, this famous civil society theorist. In this conversation, he said, I think that the use of civil society is now at a degree of almost semantic pollution. And also, as scholars in the area of social enterprise, social economy, social enterprise, social innovation, we should be willing, not only willing, we should welcome such issues, address such issues, and work with them. Also by asking questions like we did for this conference. If not for profit, for what and how? And I encourage us all to work on such important questions throughout the conference, and of course also afterwards. And EMES, what about EMES? With this conference we started a new chapter of our history that began almost, or it did in fact begin 20 years ago. Last year we celebrated our 10th anniversary in Warsaw, but that was only as a formal organization. The history goes further back. We will still in EMES have an eye on organic growth. Working with networks, our strategy is very often collaboration, network continue to develop in new ways organically. Finally, just want to pass on the word to my colleague, Professor Jacques Defourny, but before doing that, I want to thank him and the team at the Center for Social Economy, at the Business School at the University, and the Scientific Committee also, and the Organizing Committee, for having put such a lot of efforts and also resources, I can tell you, into organizing this conference. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Rector, it's now my turn to welcome you and to tell you first what it represents for us to have you here, coming from all regions of the world. When we started working on the social economy more than 20 years ago, we did not have many colleagues taking seriously this topic. That broad vision of the third sector, encompassing non-profit organizations as well as cooperatives, was almost unknown by the time, because non-profit studies had already set their boundaries through this famous non-distribution of profit constraints. And cooperatives indeed were allowed to distribute some profits. On our side, however, from a deep knowledge of cooperative enterprise, which had been studied in this university since the 50s, we knew cooperative enterprise were not just for-profit companies of a special type. In spite of problems they may have faced sometimes because they were too successful, cooperative in general had paved the way for other rules and behaviors for doing business. With cooperatives, it had become conceivable to act as a private company competing in the market while not seeking profit first. So, not for profit first, but for what? For sure, for the interest of the members. And how? By implementing some form of economic democracy and by putting constraint on the distribution of profits. Such a broad conception of the third sector, including NPOs and COPs, is still debatable. However, when the EMES European Network started its founding research project in the mid-90s, we, the EMES members, all realized that social entrepreneurship was emerging in Europe from both the non-profit and the cooperative tradition. Moreover, when a dozen of parliaments in the EU passed new laws to foster social enterprise development, it appeared that half of these legal frameworks were clearly inspired by cooperative principles. So, linking social enterprise and an open and dynamic view of the third sector became quite natural for the EMES network, and these two major teams, social enterprise, social entrepreneurship, and the third sector, still constitute the 2 feet of our works. This is also why, as we probably know, one of the most distinctive features of EMES work on social enterprise has been a special attention paid to governance process. Not just for the beauty of implementing some degree of participation. No, governance matters to combine interest
as well as to adjust an economic model, especially the financing mix, to the social and the societal aims which are pursued. By the way, governance also matters for social innovation and for other reasons, which will be dealt with during this conference. While just saying these few words about the scientific trajectory of EMES work on social enterprise, let me take one more minute to try overcoming a widespread misunderstanding of the EMES approach to social enterprise curiously. You may know that EMES has a long list, by the way, of economic and social indicators to describe social enterprise. This list of 9 indicators is now presented in 3 sets of 3 indicators each. 3 criteria for the economic dimension, 3 criteria for the social dimension, and 3 for governance, particularly governance especially. You probably know that it has often been difficult to understand that we did not use actually these criteria to draw the boundaries of the social enterprise landscape. We put them together to build an abstract type of social enterprise, which mainly serves as a methodological tool, what Max Weber calls an ideal type. That is an abstract construction which is not an ideal to be achieved. This is the most important. Not an ideal to which most social enterprise should aspire, or a list of criteria they should fulfill perfectly to deserve the label of social enterprise. Not at all. In other words, as we often wrote, our ideal type of social enterprise is just like the pole star. The pole star, as you see, is one star among many others. It just allows us to locate groups of social enterprise with respect to each other and within the galaxy of social enterprise. Being located northwest or northeast does not mean group of social enterprise should aspire and move to the north. Not at all. For us it's the same. Walking northeast or northwest is not better than or worse than going straight to the north. Other metaphors I know could be used to describe the landscape of social enterprise. But the sky and its as a 3-dimensional space is well suited to draw attention to these 3 key dimensions, the economic sustainability, the social mission, and the governance process. We are not saying that this is the best definition or the best tool to capture social enterprise. I just hope that I will never read again that the EMES network is a list of conditions to be fulfilled. With this in mind, and without at all trying to impose any particular view, we just argue that the EMES approach of social enterprise may be looked at as a quite open approach. Not a smart definition, but a very open approach, allowing for many combination of these key dimensions. By the way, openness to other traditions, cultures, national introduce. Oops. For EMES, it was obvious that we should first listen to Professor Denission. And it's why also we invited him to co-chair this conference. His book, published in the 80s, If Not for Profit, for What, was a pioneering work to which we refer in the very introduction of the first EMES book. In this book, Professor Young offered a Schumpeterian view of entrepreneurship applied to the non-profit sector. And EMES has always known him as a pioneer of social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. And it's why we took the title of the book at the same time for the conference and for the Inter-University Attraction Ball that we were awarded. But we added a second question, not just for what, but also how, if not for profit, for what and how. The book that Denis published in 1983 is just celebrating, we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of that pioneering book. And the publisher, Lexington Books, agreed to publish a new electronic version of the book, which is a new key, with a list of authors making comments to the contribution that Denission made at that time. At a time where nobody, of course, was speaking about social enterprise or social entrepreneurship, but actually, in other words, Denis was describing the emergence of social enterprise. I could add many other things about all the books Denis published, about the journals he founded, about the organization he chaired, but I won't be too long. And as he has already a doctorat honoris causa from the University of Liège, I think he will not be upset if I repeat or if I don't repeat all his merits. So, Denission has been asked to provide us with an overview of the long journey that he observed and in which he took part, from the early studies on non-profits through to the development of a literature, a whole literature on social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. So, Denis, please take the floor.
Thank you, Jacques, for those very generous remarks. And I'm just going to make one minor correction because the digital version of the book has been produced by Georgia State University Library. And I want to make sure that it's recognized. Well, speaking of pole stars, which were up there, certainly I think of Jacques as one of the guiding pole stars, and we're going to have lots of discussion about metaphors this conference. But I'm very honored to be here. I have been honored a couple of years ago by the University of Liège, and they're not here anymore. I want to
yet the objectives, he meant, of nonprofit organizations are not randomly distributed, but are systematically determined by forces that can be studied and manipulated through public policy. Point 3, in particular, entrepreneurial traits of those who create and or transform organizations do matter. And entrepreneurial traits are distributed among potential entrepreneurs, but a sorting process imperfectly matches different types to different activities, industries, and sectors. And public policy can have perverse effects when they affect entrepreneurial sorting. So you don't need to read the book now, that's the whole thing, but if you do read it, I appreciate it, and see what you think 30 years later. We now widely accept the notion that entrepreneurship is a universal phenomenon, and that social entrepreneurs constitute a different variety than business entrepreneurs. But I think we have not fully yet come to grips with the implications of entrepreneurial variety as it applies to the modern-day social sector broadly defined. In particular, the organizational choices for entrepreneurs are much broader now than they were 30 years ago. So the process of entrepreneurial sorting is that much more complex. We therefore need to ask about different organizational behaviors that result when entrepreneurs with various motivations and skill sets sort themselves into alternative vehicles of social enterprise, ranging from profit-making businesses to cooperatives to social businesses to nonprofit organizations and to various combinations thereof. We shouldn't expect these behaviors to be uniform across the board. The point is partly behind my recent explanation of, Jacques, pardon the expression, social enterprise zoo, as a metaphor for understanding the nature of social enterprise. Because, and this has come up in our conversations today, and I think you all would agree, we're talking about a lot of different animals. And at this point also, this variety of entrepreneurial motivations also influences my thinking about the stability of social enterprises and the application of what I've started to work on in the session that's going to be drawn tomorrow morning, the application of resiliency theory. If social enterprises try to balance social and financial goals in a particular way, then who leads them matters. Committed entrepreneurial leadership and the succession to that leadership seems to be one factor affecting whether a social enterprise maintains this balance or fails to do so over the long run. And I've actually talked informally, there's literature on founder syndrome and how terrible that can be if founders stick around with their enterprises for too long. But there's also a problem which I initially coined successor syndrome. When the successor comes along and doesn't have that vision, and what happens to the stability of that enterprise? Steinberg noted that I frame my theory within the context of public policy. That policy could affect the flows of entrepreneurial talent in one direction or another, thereby influencing the trustworthiness, the responsiveness, the efficiency, the innovativeness, the creativity of nonprofits. Now this perspective, I think, is even more important, since it is through policy that we are creating all sorts of new legal forms through which social and other entrepreneurs can devote their energies and manifest their goals. So Will hybrid forms allow entrepreneurs of different persuasions and with different skill sets to work together effectively in teams? Or will they result in tensions that undermine the effectiveness of such enterprises? And finally, how can public policy be shaped in a way that takes advantage of the skills and capacities of all varieties of entrepreneurs to appropriately address the spectrum of social needs facing our societies in the different social and political contexts in which they occur? So, yes, I have progressed in my research over the past 30 years from a specific focus on nonprofit organizations to a broader interest in the variegated landscape of social enterprise. But in a sense, I'm also back where I started, on the supply side, and still concerned with the role and function of entrepreneurs as leaders, shapers, resource mobilizers, and catalysts in a third sector whose boundaries and components have become ever more complex. Thank you.
Just a bit of water. I think thanks a lot, Dennis. I think your journey is always interesting. I want now to give the floor to Dr. Ellen O, who is University Senior Lecturer in Community Enterprise and Deputy Director of the MBA program and Senior Lecturer in Community Enterprise at Judge Business School, Cambridge University. In 2008, she established the Tata International Social Entrepreneurship Schemes, which offers final year undergraduate and postgraduate students at the University of Cambridge the opportunity to work on social entrepreneurship and corporate social responsibility. By the way, this view angle coming from the business world is also one of the reasons why we asked her to take the floor, why she will be speaking also on community entrepreneurship, of course. I should add that I just read in an email from the Social Enterprise Journal that Ellen article published in 2005, I think, or 7, about the research agenda for social entrepreneurship is still the most downloaded article published in the Social Enterprise Journal. So you have here a leader of the social entrepreneurship literature, and we disagree with that.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me to join them. This is my first time at the EMES conference, although I've followed the work of the group and I've consumed the articles and the books that the group has published, and so I'm delighted to be here. And particularly delighted that I was invited to talk about social and community entrepreneurship, because my particular research interests have very much focused on the community aspect of social entrepreneurship. And as interest in social entrepreneurship has increased in the last 20 to 30 years, often the voice of communities is a small voice in a very loud conversation, but I think it's an important voice that deserves to be heard. So, what I thought I would like to talk to you about was, first of all, thinking about what is it that is distinctive about community entrepreneurship in this complexity, this zoo, if you will, of social entrepreneurship. And starting off in thinking about what I was going to say, I thought I'd go back to the literature on few weeks about what is it that's distinctive about social and community enterprise. To begin with, the similarities are easy to spot. We're talking about organisations that are there to try and achieve a social mission through a variety of enterprising activities. And increasingly we're expecting to see innovation in social and community entrepreneurship. So there are lots of similarities. But what's distinctive about communities and community entrepreneurship? Well, when I look at the research that I've done, and also that many other people have done in this area, what we're talking about is activities that really try to involve people in those enterprising and social activities. We're talking about groups of people that work together cooperatively to try and engender social and economic advancement. But also we're talking about voluntary community action that comes from the heart of communities rather than being imposed by people outside those communities. Imposed, for example, by policymakers who see communities as an answer to some of the problems that they can see in society. And we're also talking about communities that look to themselves, to their own resources, and how they can use those resources in a more effective way. Now, some of those things I'm sure that you'll see in social entrepreneurship, but with communities, what is distinctive? It's about communities working together, identifying the resources that they've got, identifying a development trajectory that they want to pursue. One of the things that really challenged me when I was preparing this talk was, well, what is it that's really distinctive? Are we just talking about a variety of social entrepreneurship? And so if we think about when Dees talked about social entrepreneurship as being a variety of the genus entrepreneurship, I think that yes, when we look at community entrepreneurship, it is distinctively rooted in social entrepreneurship, but it's trying to do something different. It's trying to work in communities to try and advance those communities. And I think we can develop that distinctiveness in two different ways. First of all, when we look at the literature that community enterprise and community entrepreneurship draws on, it's very different to the literature that social entrepreneurship is drawing on. Many of the papers that are published on community enterprise and community entrepreneurship draw on literature from sociology and anthropology, and many of the leading scholars in community enterprise have anthropological backgrounds. It also looks to the community development literature. We very rarely see the community development literature cited in social entrepreneurship papers. It also looks at participatory development, and if you take the time and have an interest in looking at some of the models that have been created for community entrepreneurship, a lot of them have distinctive features that match participatory development tools, particularly Chambers' work on participatory rural development. We see strategies around getting communities together to identify the resources that they've got and looking to themselves to those skills that they can use to develop and advance their communities. But also it draws on the work of regional development and rural development, and also the increasingly popular area of indigenous entrepreneurship. These are some of the literatures that the community entrepreneurship literature draws on. And also we see work around poverty alleviation coming into the literature base for community enterprise. So there's this whole distinctive area of literature that doesn't really get used in social entrepreneurship, but is really at the heart of community enterprise and community entrepreneurship. And then also looking at what is it that community entrepreneurship is trying to do. We know that we're trying to achieve social and economic change, but there are also other goals that are important in community enterprise. And those are those goals around mobilizing local resources, it's around local people in activities that really derive from their own well-being. It's about having a democratic approach, and again we heard earlier on from Jacques about the importance of the democratic ownership structures. But I see one of the offshoots or one of the benefits of community entrepreneurship not just through democratic governance structures, but an awakening in communities about how they can influence the democratic process through increasing their confidence as they engage in community enterprise. And so this empowerment outcome is something that's really critical when we think about community enterprise. So thinking about what is distinctive, I think we can look to the literature, but we can also look to the outcomes that are aimed to be achieved by community enterprise. And just in case you think that these are very lofty ambitions, there are a number of different forms that community enterprise takes. And one of the increasingly cited theories around community enterprise is that of Pareto and Chrisman's community-based enterprise. And they're talking about a particular type of community enterprise which involves the whole community acting as a corporate to try and advance change within that community. My own earlier work on community entrepreneurship was based on groups within communities becoming more enterprising. And so you've got two different approaches there. One where it's the whole community working together, and the alternative where you've just got smaller groups within a community. But they're trying to achieve something that will benefit not just the group, but the wider community. And then, of course, we've got the cooperatives, which again are a key aspect of the EMES research network, where traditionally cooperatives were there to serve the interests of their members, but increasingly we're seeing new cooperative models, for example the new co-ops in Italy, where they are able to now focus on not just helping their members, but the broader community in which they're situated. And then of course in the UK we've got the Community Interest Company, launched in 2005, which again tries to embed this notion that it's the community that is served by the organisation through those legal structures. So there are many others, and I'm sorry if you're sitting there thinking, oh, why didn't you mention that particular model? Those are just 4 community enterprise models that we find in the literature. And these models are seen to have traction not just in developed countries, but also in developing countries. So, when we think about what it is that communities do in terms of community enterprise, I can think of 3 ways that communities are operating. One is looking inside the community to develop something that is going to benefit that community. So for example, we can see many initiatives around credit unions that are there that use the members of the community to create a financial institution that will serve that community. We also in the UK have a rising interest in communities working together to bring broadband systems to those communities. They work together through community broadbands. There you can think about communities trying to help just that community. Their resources and their efforts are focused in helping that community. But equally, we're talking about civil society and the role of organisations in helping civil society. There are other community enterprises that are trying to help other communities. And for example, if any of you are familiar with the EMES network, one of the principles of EMES is that the community helps itself, but it should also help another community. And just my local EMES in Cambridge, they have partnered with a community in Poland to try and help that community develop. So it's about helping other communities to develop. And many of you might be familiar with Zaytoon, which is a fair trade olive oil community enterprise, which is helping Palestinian olive farmers to export their products and reach wider markets. So community enterprise can look inside their own community to help their own community, but it can also be looking to fulfill, partially, I think, their own CSR agendas, but also to partner with communities to help those community enterprises become more business-like and more effective in achieving their economic and social aims. So, just to finish off, I think when we look to community enterprise, we're talking about a very important aspect of social enterprise. And I think that long after the fashion for social enterprise passes, we'll still have communities, and we'll still need to be supporting and helping communities through entrepreneurial activity to become independent and financially sustainable. And so just to finish off, when I hear Dennis's question, if not for profit, for what and how? My response to that question is, if not for profit, for communities, and do it through community engagement.
As a third, thank you very much, Adam, with this brilliant final. And now to offer a third point of view, we invited Professor Jean-Louis Laville, who is both an economist and a sociologist. He is professor at the Conservatoire des Arts et Métiers in Paris, but he's very well known for being the founder, conceiver of the solidarity economy, an approach which has renewed various third sector approach, and he has written a lot of books. I can really say a lot of books. He is one of the most productive authors in the field. He is also a founder of the EMES European Network, and he has always been contributing a lot to all the works of the EMES Network. Thanks, Jean-Louis, for being here. It's now to you.
Thank you, Jacques. I guess it's a bit difficult to stand my awful French accent in English after my colleagues, so I try to be short.
It's charming.
We have a very broad definition of social enterprise, referring, as it was said before, that a social enterprise is an enterprise with a social or environmental or societal aim. But within this very large definition, there are several proposals. Let's take three well-known proposals, for instance. There is the so-called market resources school, which is mainly dedicated to the fact that the social enterprise, according to this school, is a new orientation for NPOs towards market resources. We have also the social innovation school, which is more dedicated to the question, as we saw, about social entrepreneurship. And we have also the very famous EMES approach, as you know, which is insisting about the participatory and democratic governance structure, referring to the tradition of social economy. But I think that these very diverse approaches have a common point, that they are organizational approaches. And I think that we have to contrast these organizational approaches with other approaches, and I think I will take this example about solidarity economy theory. I think that the first specificity of social economy theory, solidarity economy theory, is that it's coming from social economy, but it was emerging really in two very different contexts in the late 70s, parallel in South America and parallel in Europe. So it's coming both from South and Northern perspective. And what I think is a way of summarizing solidarity economy theory is the fact that it's more institutional perspective is a matter of legitimacy, of sense of common living, we could say. If we want to go deeper, we can say that solidarity economy is linked with two current. The first theoretical current is what we can call, referring to the international literature, socioeconomy or economic sociology, because different from economic orthodoxy, socioeconomy or sociologic economy is not analyzing only economy, but is based on the analysis of the relations between economy and society. And I think that in this moment we need to analyze together economy and society. And second, I think that it's also linked with neo-institutionalism, which is both in sociology and in economy. So this solidarity economy perspective is questioning the adequacy between civil society initiatives and institutional framework. And it's examining this adequacy in two dimensions. First, in economic dimensions. It means that a social enterprise in this perspective is not only competing in the market. First, it's focusing on the fact that there is not one market, but there are several markets. And second, that economy is not only market. So there is this economic dimension, and the second is a political or a socio-political dimension. It means that, referring to this institutional perspective, social enterprise is not only an enterprise. It's also a way that civil society actors can choose to try and change and have an action for a social change. Of course, the economic dimension is linked with some analysis. One of the more famous is granular analysis, for instance. What is providing granular analysis? The idea is that a market is not natural. A market is a social and institutional construction, and real markets are very different from the supply-demand self-regulating market. So markets concretely are made with networking, are made with institutions. So the first point that is bringing granular analysis, for instance, is the fact that we must not have a confusion between markets and self-regulating market. But the second author, which is central for solidarity economy perspective, is Karl Polanyi, because Karl Polanyi, in his seminal work about the Greek transformation, is just saying the contrary from other authors like Fukuyama or others. He is not thinking that democracy and capitalism and market capitalism go together. He is agreeing with some others like Habermas and others that there is a contradiction between democracy, or there is at least a tension between democracy and market capitalism, and it's part of the history of the last 2 centuries. So the analytical framework from Polanyi is saying that there is a difference between market and economy. And if we go to a market society, it will provide a strong reaction from the society, and this reaction can be also an authoritarian regression. And he is taking, of course, the example of the fascism in the 30s. But I think that it's also a question for our times. So, in this economic anthropology approach, he is not confusing market and economy, and he is mentioning that in human society, we don't have one market principle, we have several principles of economic integration. And of course, the market is very important, but there are also others, like redistribution, which is linked with the principle of centrality, of a central power. We have also reciprocity, which is linked with the principle of symmetry, of interdependence, and there is also the principle of house holding. So what is very interesting in Polanyi's approach is that he is recognizing the ambivalence of markets. We need markets, but we don't need a market society, because a market society is dangerous for the whole society. So he is working with this ambivalence, providing another picture of economy, because he is thinking that there are several polarities in economy, and a social enterprise can also have a strategy of hybridization between different economic principles. So that's for the economic dimension in a solidarity economy perspective. But there is also a political dimension. In this political dimension, it's a matter of recognizing that democracy is not only a set of institutions, but has a double dimension. Of course, there is the public body dimension, the representative democracy, the monopoly of legitimate violence, if we take the phrase from Weber, but there is also the other dimension of political sphere, which is not the representative democracy, but the more participative and deliberative democracy. And here we don't meet Weber, but we meet other authors like Habermas, like Arendt, like Axel Honneth, like Nancy Fraser, and we see that in this perspective, social enterprise is not private. Social enterprise has a public dimension. It means that it's creating also the recognition of public problems. So from this recognition of public problems, we can have also new solutions appearing in the society, but these new solutions are in the area of public action, which is not reduced to public body action. So in this complex approach of political dimension, we see that it's not only the problem for social enterprise to have an internal democratic governance structure, it's also the question of real social practice, which depend on capabilities, on concrete capacity of expression for stakeholders. And there is also the question of external governance, reframing how, by public arenas, by intermediary public spaces, social actors are able to reframe partially institutional framework or to exert oppression to modify institutional frameworks. So we can say very schematically that in the narrow sense, social enterprise is a symptomatic phenomenon of what Michel Foucault calls a contemporaneous normativity, in which the only legitimate collective action is the enterprise. But in the more open sense, we can say that social enterprise, for instance, in the solidarity economic perspective, is questioning the relation between economy and democracy, and it is even questioning the definition of the categories of social economics and politics. Well, I have the feeling to be very simple in these few words, but I hope that during this week we can have other opportunity to discuss, especially about how Polanyi, for instance, or other authors are bringing something which for me is very important for social enterprise. Thank you.
a multi-dimensional phenomenon in which the respective place and roles of the social objectives, the entrepreneurial orientation, and the civil society involvement can vary a lot. Such a multi-dimensional diversity of social enterprise probably explains why the last decade has seen so many debates about the conceptualization of social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. Many definitions of this concept have been proposed, as you know, creating very widely a feeling of vagueness and confusion in many circles, which is somehow a weakness for our field. In front of such an impression of confusion, I would argue that attitudes most supportive to our field are at least threefold. One, as most of us would probably already agree, I think it makes sense to accept that no single best definition will be ever achieved. And moreover, I would even add that additional attempt to build the one single best definition, such attempt will be probably counterproductive. Second, it seems, however, reasonable to acknowledge today, and not within 5 years, to acknowledge today the fact that most attempts to conceptualize social enterprise can be connected to three major schools of thought. We didn't speak before, Jean-Louis, but we argued together that three major schools of thought have emerged and are still developing. The early income school of thought, the social innovation school of thought, putting emphasis on social entrepreneurs and on path-breaking innovation, and the EMES school of thought. None of these three approaches fully cover the whole world of social enterprise. But I'm sure that if we take them together as complementary approach, complementary to each other, we have a conceptual basis to overcome the impression of confusion. Going a step further, the third attitude. The third attitude would be to acknowledge the fact that the diversity of social and societal challenges in our society precisely calls for a large diversity of social enterprise models, and even for a diversity of approaches to the whole economy, as Jean-Louis argued. It is precisely the limits of the state and the market logic, in spite of their merits, of course, which require a wider diversity of third sector and social enterprise initiatives. In other words, the very impression of confusion may be converted into the main specific advantage of social enterprise. That is the capacity of social enterprises to build a diversity of models most suitable to address the diversity and complexity of social and societal challenges. Non-profit studies since the mid-70s have already developed major theories explaining the raison d'être of the third sector. Through the huge Johns Hopkins project on the non-profit sector across the world, non-profit studies has already succeeded, at least partly, to prove how the non-profit sector, I would say the whole third sector, is important in most economies. But the emerging research community on social enterprise enterprise and social entrepreneurship has now the responsibility of documenting much more precisely the microeconomics, the managerial facets, the institutional background, the socio-political background and dimension of those entities which are now partly reshaping the third sector and partly even going beyond the very boundaries of the third sector. More than ever, the question, if not for profit, for what, and especially how, are the challenges of this week and of the coming years. I wish you a great conference. Thank you. There's no practical information. It seems that you got emails precise enough to get early tomorrow morning and to go to the meeting points where the buses, not the buses, but the coaches, will take you upon the campus, which is a bit removed. So don't miss the coaches. And now have a good dinner and go here in the management. Thank you.
Bon, Jean-Bonnier a mis la caution, mais il n'a pas... Tiens, tu lui donnes. Ouais, il y a beaucoup, hein.